Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Brother Nouman Ali Khan. This week's episode, we're going to be talking about a question a sister asked in regards to the hijab. Stay tuned.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. You're watching the Deen Show. I'm Eddie, your host. And we have Nouman Ali Khan who's coming up. Got the question here. Somebody wrote in and they expressed their happiness that they've embraced Islam, that submission, that complete adherence, peacefully, lovingly submitting yourself to the one who created you, not to a man or a woman, but the creator of man and woman, not to an animal, to a idol or a statue or an icon, to the one creator who created the sun and the moon and everything in this universe. He's the creator, we're his creatures, we're his creation. We worship the one who created creation. And that's what this sister who wrote in, she accepted Islam. She was like many of the people who are out there today, all about the gossip magazines, music, movies, boys, girls, and all the other fun stuff people perceive as fun, and a lot of it's just wasting time. You're just wasting time because this life is a test. And if we don't pass, then we don't get the ultimate reward, paradise. So we got to work in this life to please our Creator before we meet our Creator, and that's what Islam is all about. Islam, that peaceful submission to the will of the one creator. And this is how you achieve peace, when you submit to the owner of peace. And that's what she did. But she's a little bit confused because there's some Muslims, they're not acting in accordance with Islam. So we're going to be talking about that in her question. So you can't go nowhere. We're going to be reading it out and you'll get to benefit from her question. And we'll give in the answer with Nouman Ali Khan here on the Deen Show. Don't go nowhere. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Peace be with you.
Alhamdulillah.
My
Peace be
brother,
with you too.
Nouman Ali Khan.
My brother Eddie, how are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, all praises to the Creator of the heavens and earth, that you're back with us again here in Chicago. I'm very elated. I'm very excited that you're here with us.
I'm really happy to be back. It's been a long time.
Thank you very much for finding the time to be with us.
Alhamdulillah.
I introduced
My
the show,
pleasure.
and I told our viewing audience that we're going to cover a topic. We're going to cover this week's topic based on a question that was sent in.
Okay.
So I hate to rush things, but you know, time is all we have. So the questioner is asking, let's get straight to the question so we can open up this topic. The sister Jeanette, I'm sorry, she's asking Brother Nouman that I came to Islam a few years ago after I had almost given up on life. My life before Islam revolved around fashion, gossip magazines, music, movies, boys, and all the other things that girls do. Alhamdulillah, which means all praises to the Creator, Allah guided me to Islam. My question is regarding the hijab, which I have grown to love. I'm really starting to see the wisdom behind it, as I feel it has uplifted me and has forced men to respect me. I'm confused, she's saying, brother, that I'm confused, and my question is about many of my Muslim sisters who are born into Islam and who take this for granted by either arguing against hijab, saying it's outdated, or sisters who wear the tightest of clothes and then put on the hijab. Isn't this countering the effect of what is intended by the hijab, she's asking?
Okay.
We're almost done. This is what I left behind, so back in Jahiliyyah, obviously. So I'm confused when I see Muslim sisters dressing in this provocative way. Please do a show about this, Eddie, as I feel many will benefit from this, including myself. That's why from the bunch, we picked this one because obviously...
I think it's a relevant discussion.
It is, definitely.
Yeah.
You see the things I see too, don't you?
Absolutely, I try not to.
So please, what are your comments on this?
I think this is a layered problem. We can't give a straight answer for this kind of thing because at the end of the day, the sister is confused about what she sees in other people's behavior that she expects more from. So let's start at the top. When it comes to the ruling of hijab, and for that matter, when it comes to passing a verdict on anything in Islam, is it mandatory? Do you have to do it? Or is it absolutely impermissible? You can't do it at all, etc. It's very easy for average Muslims to just quickly pass a verdict, you can and you can't, right? And you just go halal and haram. There are very few things in Islam that are absolutely no disagreement, there's no scholarly debate about them, and there's, pretty much on the essentials of it, there's unanimity. When it comes to things like alcohol and interest and killing an innocent person and these kinds of basic essential wrongs, then there's no difference of opinion among scholars. Hijab happens to be one of those things. Overwhelmingly, there is actually no disagreement among our scholars about what hijab means, what are its bare minimum requirements. There may be some technical discussion about, what's the bare minimum that constitutes a hijab, and there may be some kind of scholarly debate about that. But hijab itself as an injunction, because it's in the Quran and it's very direct and explicit, and the Prophet ﷺ himself explained it in very explicit terms, there's not really any kind of debate about whether or not it's an essential part of Islam and something required of women in Islam or not.
That's not a dubious matter.
No, it's not
unclear.
It's not an unclear matter. It hasn't been until maybe the last 50 years or something. But I mean, for the vast majority of our history, nobody raised this issue.
There's not a new madhab?
No.
That's has a different opinion on this?
It's just, in order to come up with a new opinion on this, you basically have to say for most of Islam's history, people didn't know what they were talking about. From the companions, first generation, second generation, all the way up until modern times, nobody knew what they were talking about. They were all a bunch of idiots. Nobody knew. Ma'adallah, I'm not obviously saying about them like this, but this is the opinion people have. They were backwards. They were pre-modern. They didn't understand our context. Our situation has changed. Therefore, we have to look at these things in a new way, etc., etc. The first thing I want to share, at least in terms of my conviction and the conviction of essentially, mainstream Muslims, is that these principles don't change. They are constants. But at the same time, the second conversation that has to be had in order to address the sister's problem is that people are complicated. And you have to know people's situations before you understand why they behave in a certain way. And it's not just about hijab. The sister's confused. They're born Muslims, or Muslimas in this case, and they should know better, and they're not only not doing it, but they're arguing against it. But as a matter of fact, I've met Muslims who argue in favor of alcohol consumption, who argue very vehemently about not praying because they're already connected to God spiritually, etc., etc. I mean, it's not the only thing. This mentality among Muslims of, you would be shocked, how are you Muslim if you're saying these kinds of things? How can these two things coexist? This is not limited to this one problem. So we have to understand it in the context of a larger problem. So one of the factors in that is, in the Muslim world, and especially in the West, we have suffered from a lack of basic Muslim education, Islamic education, and essential grounding in the basic teachings of this religion, the core teachings of this religion. And at the heart of that is whatever Allah says is the best for us. Whatever instructions He's given, whether we understand the wisdom behind them or not, the logic behind them or not. Because the sister, for example, appreciated the benefit of hijab, that men are forced to respect her, and she sees the blessings of it in her practical life. That's all great. But at the end of the day, that's not the reason for why she wears it. The reason a Muslim does anything Allah tells them to do is because Allah told them to do it. That's the number one reason. Once Allah tells you to do something and you trust Him, it's not because you saw benefits in it, it's because you trust Him. You did the act, whatever it may be, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's leaving impermissible sources of making money, whatever it may be. Once you came to obey Allah, trusting Him, then no doubt about it, you'll start seeing benefits. The common mistake Muslims make is when they argue in favor of something Islamic, they start talking about its benefits, right? Mm-hmm. Those benefits are always going to be there, no doubt about it, but that's not the reason. The reason is that it's an instruction from Allah. What most Muslims haven't been indoctrinated and haven't been, our education has become so weak, our basic education, that we don't see it that way anymore. We don't see that what Allah has taught us is absolutely the best for us, and whatever I think in my head I can come up with is secondary to what Allah and His Messenger have already said. It's my best interest. They're not asking me to do something that it's not beneficial to me, it's only in my favor. That's on the one side. That's about confusion and a lack of education. But there's another problem too. There are sisters I've met across the country that used to wear hijab and took it off. They used to understand it. They used to attend classes. They learned a lot. They researched the issue. If you ask them, do you know that hijab is mandatory? They'll tell you yes. So now you can argue, my God, now I'm really confused. Because I understand somebody who took it off or doesn't wear it because they don't know any better. Here's a sister that knows it, studied the issue, and then took it off. What's going on there? And it's too easy to say these people are hypocrites, or they're not true believers, or it's not fair to them. We have to understand what's going on. We don't a lot of times appreciate how difficult it can be. I can't appreciate as a man, and you can't as a man, but a sister's perspective, just like they have a hard time understanding our perspective, right? I have 3 daughters, a wife, mom, 3 sisters. They don't understand me like, my father can or another man can, and I don't understand them like they can understand each other. For a woman to go into college her corporate workplace, to work at the hospital, whatever else. And for her to spend hours and hours working around men, and they look at her funny and they say things and they pass comments and it hurts her feelings, and she's constantly putting up with that, it can really take a toll on a person. And it's not easy for a girl to take her hijab off. It's a very difficult decision. There's something very personal that happened in their life that made them do that, or is keeping them from putting it on. It's more than just they're not convinced it's the best, or that it's outdated. These are just things to say, but what's going on behind the scenes is there's fear, there's real concern. There are people making all kinds of weird arguments, like if you put it on, you'll become the center of attention. I thought the point of hijab was to not get attention, but once you put it on, you become the full center of attention. So there's a lot of psychological stuff going on that has to be solved at a person-to-person basis. It can't be resolved in one speech. And the behavior of others, we can't pass judgment on that easily, because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Just like somebody who's drinking, of course it's haram. Well, what led the guy to drink? What kind of trauma did he go through? We have to kind of deal with people in a human sort of way. And that's what our messenger did, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So inshallah, there's a third point, but perhaps after.
We're going to take a break. Yeah. We'll come back with more here, answering your question on the Deen. Back here with Nouman Ali Khan on the Deen Show, and we are talking about the issue of hijab. And you're going to go into point number 3?
Yeah, just to recap very quickly, the first point is that the ruling hasn't changed. And it's not something that's open to really discussion in the highest scholarly circles in our tradition.
Same like alcohol, prayer, all these things are
the basics, the essential fundamentals. Okay. The second point I made was, even though that's constant, that doesn't give me license to judge somebody and say, you're doing, how could you do this, you're a Muslim, because I don't know what's going on in their life, what they're going through in their head. And a lot of times what we see on the outside is behavior, but maybe there's something really going on inside the heart that has to be addressed. That's the root problem, And the same goes for the third point. The third point I wanted to make is, our teachings in Islam, you could put them under big chapters, big headings. You can organize our religion that way. Like, famous books of Islamic studies, like fiqh, for example, they have entire chapters under which multiple areas are studied. So you could have a large chapter called worship, and in it Hajj and pilgrimage and prayer and fasting, etc., studied under that one large chapter. Well, the hijab, if you were to put it under a chapter, you would probably put it under the chapter of modesty, of shame, of guarding yourself. And this is one lesson of many lessons inside this chapter. A lot of times what people do is they say, this is all Islam has to say about modesty. Once I put this thing on my head, now all of a sudden I have modesty. Of course not. No, I'm a modest person anyway. The question arises then, the word modesty or shame, I can have my own definition of it and you can have your own. I mean, every three other people have their own definition of decency, of shame, of appropriateness. Different parents allow their kids to watch different things, don't they? Some parents will have no problem their kids are watching MTV or they're going out to a movie or whatever. Others will censor every little thing and say there's no TV in our house. People have different standards. The question is, when you accept Islam, by definition, you've submitted your standards to Allah's standards. So when it comes to modesty also, you've submitted, maybe I have some idea what shame is, but Allah knows better than I do, and this is part of His standards of modesty. What I'm trying to say then is, there's a hijab on a person's face, there's a hijab on a person's head, there's a jilbab, there's a larger garment, a looser garment that they're wearing, or loose clothing in general. But there's also modesty of one's personality, right? In how we walk, how we talk, our body language, how we carry ourselves, how we behave with people that aren't from our family, with the opposite gender. These are all things that are in essence, extended lessons of hijab. You're missing the point if you don't know what chapter this belongs to. So you'll have sisters that are even wearing hijab but don't understand the larger concept of modesty, and even brothers for that matter, that don't understand the larger concept of modesty, and they're violating other lessons within that chapter. So what if they observed hijab? The other tenets are still there. They have to be observed by, respected also. So it is in fact an essential component of modesty. Whether you make common sense of it or not is irrelevant. Just like prayer is Allah teaching us how to be spiritual. I can come up with my own spiritual exercises and say, well, I think my technique works a lot better. I start with sajda, I start with prostration, and then work my way back up to standing in prayer. I've come up with a different sequence. It doesn't work, because what Allah has taught is what defines our spirituality. This is how you're supposed to exercise your spirituality. That's the ideal. The same thing goes with hijab. The same thing goes with our dietary restrictions, So it is part of that larger thing. And there is one more thing that should be said about this hijab issue. A lot of times sisters get the feeling that this is a restriction on women, and how come men don't have the same thing, and it becomes like a equal rights type thing, a women's lib type issue. And that's how it's framed. That's not fair to the Deen also. First of all, if we believe this is the religion of truth, then we believe that Allah created man and woman. And He knows man better than man knows himself, and He knows woman better than woman knows herself. And He knows exactly what man needs, and He knows exactly what woman needs. Let me give you a small example. So parents, they see their kids having an argument. They take both kids and they give them a solution. You do this and you do that. And one of them says, oh, it's not fair, you always side with that one. The matter of fact is, maybe the parent does fear one over the other and prefer one over the other, because that's a human being. In the end, it's a parent. Or maybe the parent knows better. In the case of Allah solving our disputes, there's a woman saying Allah has more restrictions on women than He has on men. This debate becomes a debate between man and woman, and who's going to resolve that debate? Allah is. When we accept Quran as guidance, then we've said Allah is going to be more fair to me than anybody else can be. And as an extension, I want to share with you a beautiful ayah, Surah An-Nisa. This is the surah of women. Allah says, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. I'll translate in English. Don't wish for what Allah Himself gave preference in terms of some over the other. Allah gave someone some blessings, some powers, some rights, some restrictions, and He gave you different rights, different responsibilities, different restrictions. Don't vie for the other and say, how come I can't have what he has? And he shouldn't say, how come I have what she has? Allah says, لِلْرِجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا. Same ayah. He says, for men, they will only have what they get to earn in good deeds. That's in the end what they've earned for themselves. وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَا. And for women, all they get is what they've earned in terms of good deeds. وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ. So وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, and ask Allah for His favor. Don't vie for one another's things. And this is not a competition between men and women. This is a competition on who does more good deeds. Allah changes our mentality about this subject, So this is really a thinking, an intellectual transformation that a person has to go through. And until they go through that, they're not going to see the point in any of Allah's instructions. Whichever they don't want to follow, they can easily say it's outdated, it's not for our times, it's not fair. They can come up with a list of complaints. And that's not something restricted to non-Muslims, it'll happen to Muslims too. Just like that sister went through a transformation and came to Islam, we're at a time now where a lot of Muslims have to go through a transformation and also come back to Islam.
I like what you said earlier. Okay, you made a clear, lucid definition. You said, you said that the prayer, just like the prayer, alcohol, they're fixed things, and since the Creator revealed to the last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and then how his companions, and then the scholars after that, and then you can safely say the four madhabs, this thing is clear. The issue is not really debatable, right?
No.
People then you went on to talk about the things that us not judging the person, but can we say that now for the sister who she made a life-changing move. She went from living a life of following her desires to Islam, submitting to the Creator. Now that she shouldn't get discouraged looking at what Muslims are doing. Islam is pristine, it's clear, so don't get shaken up by what they're doing. That's one point. The other point is, please define for our sister who don't know. They don't know. They think, okay, I can wear the tight jeans and all the junk is coming out and all this. I'm sorry, It just the tawdry dress, and they just throw on a piece of cloth over their head, and say, I'm fulfilling my responsibility. They don't know. So the two things addressed, please, and we're really almost out of time. So hit both of them. Her not to get discouraged, and the other part of what is hijab? What constitutes hijab?
Right,
is it just the cloth over the head?
Two things.
Yeah.
Number one, not only should she not be discouraged, she should understand what she's come into. She's come into a religion that calls people to the light. In other words, her job is not to see misbehavior of others and be discouraged by it, but be encouraged that she has work to do. She's part of an ummah now that is an ummah of loving reminder to others, right? So when she sees others falling into a behavior, she doesn't say this is wrong, but she says, let me remind them of who Allah is. Let me remind them for what Allah does for them. Let me soften their hearts a little bit, and then, when the disease is addressed, the symptoms will change. Not wearing a hijab is not the disease, it's a symptom. The disease is inside. And we can't be discouraged by these symptoms, we have to attack the disease. What that person might just need is a good friend, with some soft encouragement, with patience over time, and they'll transform completely, right? So that's one major point. What was your second point again?
The second point, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to address the second point when we come back here on the Deen Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. On the Deen Show with Nouman Ali Khan, and we're answering a sister's question, who we congratulate her. She came from living a life of chasing her desires. She recognized who the creator of the heavens and earth is, that Islam is the way, and she's living this way, and she's confused because some Muslims, she's thinking they should be living this too. There's a contradiction here. So we're answering the contradiction, and we left off with defining hijab. Because some sisters, they might wear tight clothes and think just put the veil on and this is hijab.
Very good. I think this is a good opportunity to share some very important basics for all new Muslims, Muslims that are trying to learn their religion, and then address the topic of hijab directly. You know, when it comes to legal issues in Islam, how do you define legal things, restrictions? It's very important that we get our answers from scholarly sources. That we don't get our answer from, to be very blunt, people like me. I'll tell you what that means. I'm a Quran teacher and I'm an Arabic teacher. Those are the two things I study and I research. Islamic law, Sharia, fiqh, is an area of expertise. And no matter how much I think I may have studied and I've taught, when it comes to a matter of fiqh and Sharia, I go to an expert in that area and say, can you define it for me? Even though I can do the research myself. I would rather somebody who's poured their life studying this stuff and ask them hard questions and get the answer. So what I'm going to share with you is a basic definition.
This is what the scholars are obviously saying.
Right.
You're just going to tell us what they're saying.
But my word means nothing. Even if I'm quoting the scholars, in the end, my word on this issue means nothing.
Some people would rather listen to you because you speak the vernacular language of the youth, and they look up to you and say, I can relate to him better. So they might take it from you rather than taking it from someone else.
That's true. But alhamdulillah, now more and more we have contemporary, well-spoken, articulate, young, American scholars that are up and coming, and I think they should be put on the spot on these kinds of issues too. But nonetheless, I'll define some very basic essentials. Hijab, all the differences, additional opinions aside, the minimum is the hair to be covered, and of a loose cloth that covers the front, the chest of the woman in a loose way. The jilbab is the second item of clothing, and by the way, the hijab, the Quranic term for that is khimar. Khimar. Khimar comes from the word khamr, and the word khamr literally means to cover something. From it also comes the word, khamr is also the word for alcohol. Why? Because it covers your intellect. You can't think straight. Which is a beautiful word, because then people ask, is beer okay? Because I'm not drinking wine. Khamr means wine. Anything that overshadows your intellect, in the least bit, is khamr automatically. So it takes care of that issue. But regardless, khimar means something that covers. And that's for the top garment. Then it comes for the garment of the rest of the body. It's supposed to be an outer garment, jilbab, something that covers over. The way that's been interpreted essentially is something that's some basic conditions. One, it's not form-fitting, it's loose, and it goes down, in some debate whether it goes down to half the shin or all the way down to the ankle, but regardless, it's pretty long. It's a long overgarment that is not form-fitting. Then there's also debate about whether is it one piece or two pieces. Is it one long piece and one shorter piece? Does it have to be one long piece? And these are academic discussions. But the main point is it has to be loose and not form-fitting at all.
Say that again. Loose?
Loose, not form-fitting, and an outer garment.
Form-fitting? Shape of the body?
Right, so it can't be tight clothing, it can't be the shape of the body.
So these precious things that should be maybe for your husband, not every, Tom, John can see that.
Yeah, and that makes absolute and complete sense, because the Prophet ﷺ, in a very famous hadith, actually cursed a category of women. Kasiyat, ariyat, he called them, dressed but naked. He called them dressed but naked. And what that meant was form-fitting, see-through kinds of clothes, etc. These are the women that...
see-through?
See-through. No see-through, right.
Tight jeans? Some people like...
If you want to
say jeans,
if you want to wear them, put an overcoat on top or something, or put something longer on top or whatever.
So you don't see
nothing
showing the shape.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the basic definition to a modest Muslimah, is something that she doesn't even have to do research for. She just has to ask herself, if I was standing in front of my father, in front of my brother, would I be the least bit embarrassed? Would I be the least bit uncomfortable? Now, for some people, they've lived around them in a life of shamelessness for so long that their sense of shame has died. So they say, I have no problem standing like this in front of my father. But for people that have a sense of modesty, they know. They know they're about to go to a party, they're dressed a certain way, and if their mother saw them, their father saw them, their older brother saw them, their uncle saw them, they'd be embarrassed, they'd be taken back. Well, you know what? If your personal conscience is sounding off the alarm, you're probably on the wrong track. I mean, there's a fatwa being passed, there's a legal verdict being passed by your own conscience. So these legal discussions aside, it's just a matter of what just dressing respectfully and not exposing yourself in a way that's not becoming of a decent woman and a believer.
An attitude, the good persona that comes with it, because some people argue that, hey, she's wearing the right hijab, but she don't have the right attitude. I've seen this girl who is wearing hijab and she's doing worse than the one who's not.
Actually, you bring up a really good point.
We're almost out of time, so I need you to just...
So let me make this point really concise. On the other end of the aisle are people that aren't observing these things, any aspect of religion. Let's take hijab in this case as discussion. And they point at people that are wearing hijab but have a bad attitude, or they're messed up in some other way, and they backbite, or they're dating, or whatever else they're doing that's messed up, even though they have the hijab on and they got the outer garment on and everything, right? Just like people misbehaving are not a source of discouragement for me that is trying to behave, just like that people that are misbehaving can't quote bad examples and say, therefore I don't have to answer to God. You're not responsible because you saw a good example or a bad example. The example's already been revealed. The sample's already been revealed. The role models have already come and gone. Last point I'm trying to make. We don't look for role models that are around us. The very first surah of the Quran tells us to look for role models that have already left. الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. The path of those who you already showered, past tense. Not those who shower right now, because I don't know if they're going to be on the right path tomorrow. We look for righteous guidance in those in the past. The entire Quran is full of stories of those who already passed. That's what we're supposed to look for pillars of guidance, not anybody else. When we anchor our hopes in them, we're constantly disappointed, and then we end up losing our faith ourselves.
A couple more points. We're almost out of time.
Sure.
Tell us now, please. You mentioned some sisters who know about hijab, they know the verdict, they know this is something that is compulsory on every Muslim woman, and they take it off, let's say. But now you see them take it off. Should we encourage the sisters who are wearing it, but they see educated, let's say a sister, she just took it off, can this be a test from Allah? Because this life is a test. And let's say if everyone and their mother took it off, you be the one that keeps it on, because it's a test. And can Allah be testing you through those people?
That's
and
correct.
Created them just for that specific person to test you, and now you, because 50 people took it off, you take it off too. You fail in the test.
And the other thing that happens is a girl takes it off, whatever she's going through, and the other girls in her circle that are still wearing hijab, they start looking at her funny, and she goes, oh, they look at me funny, I don't want to hang out with them. So she finds different company. Now she doesn't even have someone to remind her. And it's the fault of those other girls that do wear hijab that became judgmental all of a sudden. They should have been supportive at that time. That's what community is. A cult judges people that become different. A community takes in people that are fallen and says, let me get you back up. We have to be communities. We can't turn into cults. We can't turn into cliques that people avoid us because they don't want to be judged. That by definition means we've turned into a cult. So if you have a sister in your group that has become like that, you have to reach out and befriend her and not discuss hijab. Just be a friend. All she needs is a friend right now. She doesn't need a lecture about why she should put hijab on. She already knows that. What she needs right now is just some comfort and somebody to be able to relate to. And eventually, when her heart softens, and that's up to Allah, may Allah Azza wa Jal bring her back to committing herself to all aspects of the deen, including the hijab.
Thank you so much for finding the time to be with us.
Barakallahu feekum.
Inshallah, I look forward to have you back again.
Great to be back.
Show.
How time flies.
Yes. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Deen Show. We'd like to congratulate our sister who took that choice that she has of either worshiping the creation or worshiping the Creator. Sister Jeanette, who accepted this way of life of all the messengers of God, the worship of the one Creator. And she submitted in Islam. Islam simply meaning to acquire peace by submitting to the owner of peace, the Creator, the one God, the same God that Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and the last and final messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and all of them, they all submitted to the one God. And you've done that. Never get discouraged. Always rely on the one who created you, the one who gives you the air that you breathe, the eyes that you see with, and know that this life is a test. And if you pass the test by obeying your Creator, loving your Creator, doing what your Creator wants you to do, paradise, that's the ultimate prize. So never get discouraged. And everybody keep tuning in here to the Deen Show. We'll see you next time. Until then, peace be unto you.